Hi, I'm Greg Crawford with the Friday News Dump, brought to you by World News Trust. Of all the malevolent machinations perpetrated by radical right-wing corporatists, one of the most despicable has to be their concerted effort to privatize public education. These oily and thoroughly dishonest people pay shallow lip service to the lofty ideals of public service, but they are lying through their teeth when they do it. Their sole purpose is to turn what has always been and should remain a public service into a revenue stream that enriches a few at the expense of the many. In this instance, it's at the expense of our children. And mean, greedy people who would steal a child's future for financial gain are so vile that they deserve no mercy whatsoever. In order to figure out how to neutralize this threat to education, and by extension the stability of our economy and society, we must first understand the motivations of those behind this diabolical scheme. And without exception, their principal motivation is pathological selfishness. Such selfishness is invariably intertwined with an equally pathological craving for dominion over the lives of others. In fact, pathology defines every aspect of the personalities of those behind the efforts to privatize government functions that were instituted to promote and protect the common good. Contrary to the superlatives with which they prefer to describe themselves, they are not the smartest guys in the room. Oh, they possess a certain simian cleverness in their ability to manipulate people and even to amass considerable fortunes by nefarious means. But their short-term greed blinds them to the inevitability of their ultimate failure. As the old saying goes, you can fool some of the people all of the time, and all of the people some of the time, but you can never fool all of the people all of the time. You're gonna get caught. And the proponents of privatization are starting to get that deer in the headlights look about them. Small wonder every privatization scheme perpetrated thus far has been an abject failure. The quality of products and/or services has plummeted while the costs have skyrocketed, and brazen fraud and the disappearance of billions of dollars has become endemic. The most glaring example being the outsourcing of tasks that the military had historically managed in-house, so to speak, to hopelessly corrupt and inept companies like KBR. They couldn't even manage to install lighting for barrack showers without electrocuting several servicemen. And though no one can be sure, because the accounting was so opaque, it is rumored that the light bulbs cost taxpayers $1,000 apiece. So there's that. With regard to the topic at hand, Dick Cheney and his hand puppet George W. Is Our Children Getting an Education? Bush instituted No Child Left Behind, the cynically misnamed program to save public education from itself. In reality, it was a scam from the get-go, designed to force public schools into failure through the imposition of draconian standards and testing that often bore no relevance to the curriculum that semester. In other words, students were expected to answer questions about subjects they had not studied. Every school was expected to improve by certain rigid percentages, or they lost funding. The most destitute schools in the inner cities were judged by the same criteria as the schools in wealthy suburbs: fall below an arbitrary level of achievement, and vital funding from the feds evaporated. Even if the best schools in the country fell below that benchmark, it was suddenly branded as a failing school. You would think that additional help and funding would go to the schools most in need, but not in the upside-down world of the neocons. Oh, no. If Johnny and Janie weren't learning fast enough, then the teachers were vilified. External influences such as poverty, family problems, or learning disabilities were not factored in. So a school's rating could blow up simply because it was adhering to other federal standards that mandated that children with learning disabilities be accommodated in the classroom. Teachers were between a rock and a hard place, a classic case of damned if you do and damned if you don't. As a result, instructing children in the art of critical thinking went out the window, and everyone had to teach to the test or update their resumes. In a little more than a decade, the performance of American students as compared to those in other developed countries has fallen into a sinkhole of mediocrity. Well, what can you expect when the content of school textbooks is controlled by religious fanatics who think the jury is still out on the theory of evolution? They're probably suspicious about the theory of gravity, too. And forget about the theory of general relativity that ushered us into the nuclear age, or as they would probably say, the nuclear age. The point being that critical decisions are being made by people so uninformed that they don't even understand the difference between a theory and a hypothesis. Such staggering ignorance should not be a party to such important decision-making processes. If you want to be part of the discussion, then do your homework. That goes double for the politicians who enact stupid and malicious laws like No Child Left Behind. One of the most unfortunate aspects of education in America is an ingrained distrust of education in general. Sadly, there are people that joyously wallow in ignorance. They are resentful of the accomplishments of others and even more resentful of their success. To acknowledge the value of education would be to admit they were wrong, and that sure as hell ain't happening. The children of such people are deprived of intellectual stimuli from birth, and so begin their school careers at a considerable disadvantage. And all too often it goes downhill from there. Efforts to mitigate these deficits are cut off at the knees by politicians more concerned with obstructing initiatives from Democrats than they are with actually doing anything to help their constituents. And the constituents who would benefit most from the programs they obstruct are the same ones that habitually re-elect them. Go figure. Next week, we will look at some possible solutions. Be sure to tune in.